Hey there, guys. You're watching the Brotherhood of Gaming. I'm William Morris, and if you've got the keenest eyes and the sharpest mind, you might be able to tell that we're at Disneyland right now. At the time I'm recording this video, it's been just about 2 months since the launch of Kingdom Hearts 3, a game that we thought was so far off in the distance, we couldn't have imagined it ever coming close. But lo and behold, we found the light at the end of the tunnel, and so in celebration of this wonderful event, I traveled down to my favorite home away from home, Disneyland, for my own adventures to be sure that I was going to be in the right mood. Now, at this point, like many, I have fully completed Kingdom Hearts 3 100%. But I felt like I wanted to wait a little bit and let the game and I just stew a little bit before I gave out my honest opinion. Lord knows you can get shot for doing something like that. Now, Kingdom Hearts 3 so far has been hit with a lot of conflicting opinions from people, and yeah, it's quite the Wild West up in here. I mean, you got people from all sides of the spectrum going on. I mean, from those that love it, those that recognize that it has some issues, which vary from person to person, depending on how you ask, you know. Although, to be clear, there are no game ruiners here. Definitely not in my case. And I think for most actual fans, they do have similar issues. But there are some who just straight up do not like Kingdom Hearts 3 at all because of reasons. Some reasons I can understand, but most of the time I found them so reaching that they are pretty much just coming off like naysayers who just want to sound smarter by criticizing something and comparing it to other things. Yeah, look, we all love Kingdom Hearts 2 to death even, but I guess now we're gonna pretend that it was a flawless masterpiece with perfect gameplay, not to mention the fact that most of the great stuff wasn't in the original version, which also had little replay value beyond its campaign, and linear level design. Remember that? And frankly, if you had to ask me where I stand, truly I'm somewhere in the upper middle ground. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a foreshadowing or spelling out of doom for this game, but I am just going to continue to be honest and try to explain what's working and what I think needs improvement, based on my personal experience. And keep in mind, I've been a part of this series since its inception, having owned all of the various versions long before remasters were even considered. I love the series to death. I'm unapologetic about that, but I'm not afraid to call out some of its problems, but I'm also not gonna bust its chops for not delivering unrealistic expectations. So, now before we dive knee-deep into the game specifics, for the newcomer out there that's watching, let me just help you guys out to get the simpler things out of the way. Can a newcomer play Kingdom Hearts 3? Yes, I'll explain the cons to this choice, but first and foremost, let me remind you that at the end of the day, this game is a simple-to-play action-adventure game with stat-building RPG elements, with a lot of Disney Flavor Flav thrown in. The gameplay isn't too demanding, but it's definitely not a game for toddlers either, by any means. It's not gonna be just some walk in the park. You will have to try. But if you want to explore Disney movie worlds and see the cool sights and fight some bad guys, then you will definitely have a good time. The game does not fail to deliver on that. None of them have. Beyond that, though, there may be some concerns, like skipping the entirety of the Harry Potter series and going straight into Deathly Hallows Part 2 kind of concerns. Yeah, it looks like an amazing spectacle, but do you know what's going on?
I don't know.
Exactly.
Anyway, now that we got all of that out of the way, let's talk about Kingdom Hearts 3. As far as its presentation goes, Kingdom Hearts 3 does not hold back. From a solid instrumental opening of Face My Fears that emotionally recaps the series, it definitely grabs and tugs at your heartstrings right away, assuming, well, that you've been a fan up until now. The game will make it immediately clear that this has been a long-running series, and it's very self-aware in that. It spares no expense to drive the point that this has been an epic tale. So to bring those up to speed who aren't necessarily diehard fans, the title screen has a memory log which does try to teach newcomers about the history of the series and what historical moments happened in order to get this far. It tries. Oh, trust me, it does try to grab your interest, and it may fill you in on some of the details, but I'm sorry. Without having been a part of the experience directly and receiving all of the information firsthand, it really doesn't matter how much they try to abridge and tell you. It's just not going to mean as much this way without having experienced the adventures for yourself, anticipating the continuation and speculating when the next adventure would be.
Now, does this mean that newcomers are going to have a hard time getting into the story? Well, the answer is a little complicated, and I think for the most part, definitely yes. The story arc with the villain Xehanort, which has been a running theme since the first game, constantly expanding, is at its all-time climax here, with a ton of original characters that have been established over the course of the series that new players will be 100% completely unfamiliar with. Not only will most of the characters outside of the Disney worlds be unfamiliar to newcomers, but the overall soap opera that is the plot and the rules of the universe in which Kingdom Hearts takes place is going to be an ever-confusing nightmare that sometimes even die-hard fans have a little trouble every now and then understanding some of it. It's not that the series is convoluted, it's not. It's just that over the course of 7 main entries and a handful of remasters, and a cell phone gacha game thrown in there somewhere, there's been loads of exposition and information dumps that, honestly, it's just a lot to take in. The series has been going on for just about 18 years now, so you can imagine that is a long time for fans to sit and simmer about the information each game has given us in between releases.
Are you done rambling?
No. Production-wise, the game hits hard with its really great visuals that are beautiful to look at, and the quality in which the game captures the look of the very recent Disney CG films and the well-beloved Pixar classics is absolutely freaking amazing. I mean, our gaming technology has gotten so visually impressive that it really feels like we are in the Disney world. I mean, some people are kind of mixed on the look of Kingdom Hearts 3 since literally every game before it has been pretty consistent with its visual design. But again, I find it to be a welcome addition. With the visuals and the graphics being able to make the worlds look far more detailed, it really helps me in taking it all in and making the various worlds you visit just feel all that more alive. Speaking of which, what also really enhances this is that for the first time, with a few exceptions, the worlds feel truly lived in, and by that I mean, oh my god, look at this, they're populated! Hallelujah! Oh, there's people! Jeez, I never thought I'd be so excited to see NPCs walking around. The moment you even begin the game, you have to go and save citizens. Citizens, I tell you, this is your first mission. That is so amazingly new. And believe me, this alone was a big improvement. If you've played Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep or Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance, Jesus Christ, you know how sad it was when those games tried to fool you in pretending that they had a lively world.
The guests were just starting to enjoy themselves.
Yeah. What's really great is that just by walking around the environments, you can hear the townsfolk engage in conversations live. Yeah, this is a norm for games these days, but this is a first for the Kingdom Hearts games. Sad but true, but you know what? Screw it. Progress is progress. Along with that addition, no longer are there any dialogue balloons like in the previous games. Every conversation, no matter how important or little, is fully voiced, for better or for worse. Very similar to Final Fantasy XV, your comrades, such as Donald and Goofy, will just be talking on the go, as will all the other NPC characters. Most of the time, they will be hipping sort of something amidst the environment, like a hidden object or materials, and yeah, to some, this could probably get annoying after a while. I mean, when you hear them say the same thing repeatedly.
I bet we'll find some ingredients around here.
This might be a good spot to find some ingredients.
I heard you the first 5 million times! I know there's an ingredient here! You know what, but hey, truthfully, this just kind of comes with the territory. I mean, with this particular enhancement, that's how famous lines like an arrow to the knee become so memorable. But you know what? I will gladly take Donald and Goofy telling me about some nearby ingredients 500,000 million billion gajillion times over this. I have seen true hell, people. Count your blessings. Now, in spite of the more creative visuals and the fact that the world has NPCs running around, there can be some drawbacks to this, and while this is something that I do think could be remedied in ways I'll talk about later, it is kind of sad. If you're familiar with the world of Twilight Town, then you probably already know where I'm going. In Kingdom Hearts 3, Twilight Town, for what it shows off, looks gorgeous. The alleyway has a movie theater going on, a new bistro is in town, it's all very stunning and fun to see. Even with the sewer addition they made and the fact that the local construction fixed the wall leading into the forest, that's all really great stuff. But I guess the rest of the town is being remodeled because, yeah, the sandlot, the multiple districts, the trolley tunnels, the train station, all of that has been omitted. Which means you're only going to be seeing the plaza, the woods, the new sewers, and the front of the mansion. Yeah, you don't even get to go inside this time. Not outside of cutscenes, anyway. So yeah, in Twilight Town, the world looks fantastic. But you only get to see about a quarter of the world in its entirety. Winnie the Pooh's world, of all things, also took a bit of a strange hit. I mean, no longer do you have to hunt down its pages, which may or may not have been fun for most, but when you go inside the book, you only have one single area to roam around, and it's Rabbit's house. I mean, there's not much to do here anyway, besides play a series of the same minigame in order to gather food items, but just the fact that this is it's kind of concerning. Thankfully, none of the other worlds have this particular problem, but some more than others have their own issues, depending on who you ask. One world particularly I'm surprised isn't here, though, is Hollow Bastion / Radiant Garden. Don't get me wrong, worlds like this like to show up in cutscenes quite often, and for what little you do get to see of it, the town and the laboratory do look great, as I would expect them to. It's just a shame that we never get to visit this town. Now, if you're a Kingdom Hearts 2 veteran, and you probably are, you'll probably agree that this world in particular is likely the most famous world in the series up until now. It was jam-packed with loads of content and things to explore and do in the previous one. Not to mention how many memorable moments happened in the world: the 1000 Heartless battle, the Demyx fight, the gauntlet of battles with Final Fantasy characters teaming up with you, the Cavern of Remembrance. Shit, it's a world I sorely miss. Believe me when I say, had this world been included, it alone could have potentially solved most of the problems people tend to complain about.
I'm supposed to believe that?
Alright, I guess it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. You know what? It's no secret that for a franchise that built its reputation on combining other franchises like Disney and Final Fantasy, there's quite a lacking in the Final Fantasy character department for this one. And by that I mean, there are no Final Fantasy characters at all. It's been well noted how everybody feels about this, and while there have been explanations that the characters in Kingdom Hearts are now big enough to support the game on their own, I still don't find it to be a valid excuse, since part of what made the game work and what made it fun in the first place was the fact that it took an unheard of concept and made it work against all the odds. Excluding the Final Fantasy characters now, on the excuse that they aren't needed anymore, I find is simply that, an excuse. One that kind of forces the perspective that they were only there in the first place because the game couldn't stand on its own without the fan service. Personally, I do not believe that, but it's not hard to draw the conclusion. Yeah, quite the shock. It was a hard pill to swallow, and after looking into it, Nomura, who's the big cheese of the series, did come out and added that there were also 30 characters that needed developing, and adding further characters would have only made things tougher, and well, the man does speak the truth. There are indeed a ton of pre-established characters with arcs continuing in this game. Sort of. It's a valid claim, but I still can't imagine it would have been too much of an issue to have at least have one dedicated world to Final Fantasy characters. I mean, just like all the Disney worlds we visit. That's where I think Radiant Garden would have been perfect. A familiar world like Twilight Town, but just for the Final Fantasy characters we've met up until now, like Leon and Cloud. And the villain of the stage could have just been Sephiroth, finally going all out. That would have been at least a good way to wrap up Cloud's arc about the darkness constantly following him, and it could have brought closure to the cast of characters that we've been with. That would have at least scratched the itch for Final Fantasy characters. Having done just that alone would have probably satisfied everyone. But hey, you know, would've, should've, could've, but no. And yes, while there are no Final Fantasy characters in the game, I don't count Mog from FF6 or the Easter eggs as accurate representation. You know what? No. These are hardly worthy representations. The fact that there are no real Final Fantasy characters here to represent just doesn't sit well with me at all. Again, I understand why, sort of, but this is still one of the foundations of Kingdom Hearts, and when we start taking steps in dismissing them, I feel like we start to lose sight of what made this franchise so legendary to begin with. Now, we do know that DLC is going to happen, and some of it already has, and I will probably mention that later on, and DLC is going to continue coming in the future that will extend Kingdom Hearts 3 to be the final mix version over time, but for right now, this is all I can go on. That being said, let's talk about the story. Now, I don't feel it's necessary to give you all a complete play-by-play of what's going on in the story, so I'll just run down the general happenings and my thoughts about how things have played out and the conclusion of the overall Xehanort arc. The game picks up right after the events of 2.8 Final Chapter Prologue and Dream Drop Distance. Sora, as noted, in Dream Drop, failed to complete the Mark of Mastery, which should have granted him the ability to have the Power of Waking, a useful ability to help fallen Keyblade wielders of light. You know the ones. The heroes suggest that they should go after Aqua, who's still trapped in darkness since they now have the means to get her out, and her also being the only one where they know where to find. Meanwhile, Kairi and Axel are going to be spending the game off the side, training for the looming final battle. Sora, on the other hand, is more or less instructed to seek out more Disney worlds and help their struggle against the darkness, in the hopes that he'll regain his lost power, and hopefully, the one that he should have already gained. During his expositions of the worlds, he briefly runs into the villains from the Organization 13, who pretty much just show up to either belittle Sora or remind him that shit's gonna go down soon. Occasionally, we see the organization having their internal debates and conversations, and it's pretty clear that they are not all on the same page, but are more or less stuck on a path that they are given. Still, with a few betrayals here and there, the good guys do ultimately get all that they need to succeed in helping the Lost Warriors and preparing for the climactic showdown with Xehanort in order to stop him from getting the Keyblade and, of course, Kingdom Hearts. Amidst all the fighting, unfortunately, Kairi is struck down, which infuriates Sora. The good guys clash with the forces of darkness, the heroes ultimately do come out victorious. Sora defeats Xehanort with Donald and Goofy by his side, and then Xehanort passes on with his friend by his side. With all the evil vanquished, Sora parts with his friends, saying that he's gotta go in alone to rescue Kairi from whatever fate that has befallen her. The friends wish him luck, and that's ultimately the story. Now, because I've been a fan of this drama the entire time, I found that the story and its conclusion to be satisfactory. Of course, because of how long the game took to come out, and with all of the anticipation, there was little chance the game was going to deliver on all fronts, on whatever our imaginations were building it up to be. I do still think that introducing time travel one game ago was kind of a misstep. Sure, they had rules about how it worked, but I still think it needlessly added a complexity that did break a few things, and it just didn't need to. The climactic finale, I thought for the most part, was pretty good, but certain scenes do feel a little rushed, only because of the situation that they are in. When some of the heroes like Roxas, Xion, and Terra are reunited with their friends, we don't really have much or any time to really dwell on it, or to take it in, nor do the characters. They're just kinda quickly accepting to it, and then they have to get back to the action. The pacing of Kingdom Hearts games has always been a little weird, where the real juicy stuff doesn't really happen until the climax of the game, and that's where I think that this game in particular could have done better to break that formula, and perhaps sprinkle in some of these major reunions throughout the story instead of jam-packing it all in the last half hour of the game. I mean, if they had done that, I think we could have appreciated it a little more. Also, some have stated that because of how quickly things happen in the last act, some of the resurrection stuff going on, like Xion, isn't really explained too well. I personally think the game gave us enough information on how she was able to come back, but hey, if Square is gonna go out of their way to add more story content to help define some of these more key moments, well, who the hell am I to say no? I mean, sure, by all means, do it. This whole thing was my biggest disappointment, was that just the characters are back and that they don't really have time to just sit and talk much, which is a shame because I think a game like this needs those scenes. And to be fair, it does have a couple of small scenes, but again, not everyone is there, and it's all towards the final act, so it just feels like it could have been better if they managed the story a little better. However, one of the funnier moments I thought was towards the end when the group of heroes are all together, and for the first time, Roxas and Ventus see each other and are like, what the fuck? That got a really good laugh out of me. Still, at the end of the day, it was a delightful conclusion to an arc, and now for the first time, we find the series in a refreshing state, where its continuation is no longer grounded to the soap opera. Sure, there are elements that hint to another plot on the horizon, like with Maleficent and her search for the box that we heard back in back cover, and the sudden realization that Xigbar was Lushu the whole time. This just opens up so many more possibilities and where the series can go now. But one thing, in my honest opinion, must remain consistent. Disney themes and/or worlds must still play a role in the plot at large, and they need to find a way to get the Final Fantasy characters back in the game. Yes, Sora will still be the overall focus, as well as his friends probably, and that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't have it any other way. But like I said, when we start to distance ourselves from the foundation and why a series like this got so much love and attention in the first place, we may be setting ourselves up for disappointment, and I hope Square Enix realizes this. Thankfully, it appears that they are listening to fan criticism and are willing to fix whatever they can if possible. Now that the story stuff is out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay and mechanics, and all that stuff that makes up the play experience. Kingdom Hearts 3 ultimately, I feel, took a handful of pages from the previous Kingdom Hearts games, and took the elements that they thought were the coolest and kind of mixed and matched them into one fine powder. So let's talk about my favorite part of the Kingdom Hearts games, the combat. Now, a lot of people I think will agree that Kingdom Hearts 2 did at the least set the quality example of how a combat system should be in a Kingdom Hearts game. It's fast-paced, it's action-packed, you have a ton of options at your disposal, and the spectacle, along with the strings of combos you can dish out, is utterly satisfying. It's fast, it's responsive, and can be downright broken at times. The later games definitely delivered on their own brand, and there was nothing inherently wrong with the way they went about it. It was just different. And I think that's the problem a lot of people had. Kingdom Hearts 2's combat for a lot might have been too good. So much so that any other type of combat experience with this franchise was considered automatically not good because of how intricate and how finely tuned that system was. That being said, I think Osaka Team, the current developers for the battle systems, really hit the ball out of the park with Kingdom Hearts 3. It's definitely the best combat experience since Kingdom Hearts 2, that's for sure. And in some ways, I believe they've even improved on it. First of all, it's well known that over the course of any of these games, you will acquire a handful of Keyblades that do specific things. In Kingdom Hearts 3, not only can you upgrade each individual Keyblade, giving each one further use beyond its original form, but you can also equip 3 Keyblades at a time, and in the heat of battle, use the left and right buttons on the D-pad to switch them out on the fly. This mechanic is a fantastic enhancement that allows you to change the flow of combat to whatever you need. From Keyblades that are more suited to magic enhancing and spellcasting, to heavy offensive based attacks, to even more defensive based techniques. To amplify this effect, Sora's base abilities have changed a little bit since Kingdom Hearts 2. Sora's form changes, for example, have taken a new approach. When fighting any enemies and attacking them long enough, you will notice that 3 arrows will build up over time, and once they are maxed out, due to you constantly beating ass, multiple abilities will become accessible, like a form change. Depending on what Keyblade you are currently using and activating the form change with the triangle button, Sora will transform into the appropriate form that really takes advantage of the Keyblade's inner power, and it will transform that Keyblade into a more enhanced form of whatever it's good at. So as soon as you transform, a little countdown meter will appear below your attack command. This indicates how long you will be able to be in that form before it depletes, and then you gotta restart the process all over again. Oh, but if you thought this was all, guess again. While you are in the form change, which is badass enough, you are dangerous and will start pulling off crazy powers just by beating more ass. One thing to be aware of, which is a pretty easy mistake to make, is that when you transform into a different style, you can either intentionally or accidentally activate the form's finishing explosive attack by pressing the triangle button again. And unless you want to get out of the form early, it would probably be best to take advantage of all of the time you are given with it. By continuing to build up combo chains in this form, you will also notice that different finisher moves will start appearing with the more damage you deal out whilst attacking. When the timer is at its lowest, this is the best time to use the special move, and unless you have one of Sora's skills activated which automatically triggers it for you when the gauge runs out, which I recommend equipping as soon as you get it, you may want to keep an eye on that bar so you don't waste the opportunity. But you do get this skill pretty early, so this shouldn't be an issue. So yes, form changes are badass, and the hella take advantage of all the Keyblades in-game, making each one of them useful, especially when you upgrade them, making each one stronger, something previous Kingdom Hearts games sadly didn't really do. In fact, I don't think anyone will argue that in just about every Kingdom Hearts game before this one, when it came to Keyblade selection, you usually stuck by only one, despite having many options. Yeah, don't lie, you know which ones were the good ones. Okay, so that covers form changes. However, Sora does have plenty of other abilities to work with. Let's talk about some of his base moves. Like before, Sora is pretty agile. Moving around the environment is a lot of fun, as Sora can run up most of the walls, making for a lot of fun exploration while getting higher and higher. In and out of battle, he can run really fast, he can dodge roll, and if timed correctly, completely avoid incoming pain. He can block, which also if timed correctly will save a life. And now, unlike before, Sora can block and dodge while in mid-air. Yes, aerial combat is now just as important. Now everybody who loves Kingdom Hearts 2 will admit, while it was fun to do aerial moves, they were more risky to pull off with certain enemies because you didn't have many defensive options up there, hence why gravity quickly pulled you back to the ground. Kingdom Hearts 3 changes the game up a little bit, to which some have complained the combat to be very floaty as a result, which has become quite controversial for, well, dumb reasons, I think. By design, Kingdom Hearts 3 takes advantage of both ground and aerial combat, allowing you to defend and retaliate however you choose to do so. The worlds are by and large much wider and much bigger, so the combat really takes advantage of the space. In fact, now more than ever, you are probably more safer in the air, especially towards the end of the game when you get the glide ability, which is admittedly a little broken due to how far out of reach you can be from any danger. As per my experience, I still found Sora to be very responsive and quick on the draw, the way I like, and at a comfortable pace. You still need to time some of your moves just right, but that in time comes with just more experience. Magic is also a returning feature and has some interesting quirks all its own. As usual, Sora can set command whatever magic is preferred for combat, and they can be triggered at any time, as long as the magic meter is full, that is. Fire is definitely the most useful, as its reach is unreal and easily homes in on targeted enemies. Some would even say that fire is a bit overpowered. To that, I say, you know what, so what? To me, this just gives the player more options. If they prioritize magic-based gameplay and want to play with distance, well, it's now an option, if you choose to seize the initiative. Hey, go for it. Now, even more interestingly, remember those 3 arrows that fill up with the more combo damage you dish out? If you throw in some magical attacks frequently whilst building up the gauge, you can also gain the ability to fire off a super-powered magical shot on top of the incoming form change. Now, I've heard it's really random on what type of super magic attack you'll see appear for use, and for the most part, I guess it might be, especially depending on what accessories you have equipped to Sora and the group, which can influence that sort of thing. But to my knowledge, I found that the more often I use a fire-based magic attack, the far likelier it's going to be that my Super Blast will be the fire-based one, as it should be. When you mix it up in the heat of battle and start throwing in multiple magical attacks from Waterza or things like that, thunder and fire, that's when I think it really starts to become a random pull on what you may ultimately get. True, while this may in some ways be out of your complete control, I can't say that you don't have any influence over it. And frankly, I can't say it's all that detrimental either. I mean, in my opinion, I think the more you use it, the more you will probably understand how it works in the long run and comfortably figure out how to manipulate it for whatever you need. Okay, the summons are back. Are they useful? Sure. In fact, I've also heard that if used right, they can be just as powerful and absurdly broken in need of some tweaking. I personally don't use the summons that much, but they are there and can be helpful in a tight spot. Some of them, like Wreck-It Ralph, have a bit of a learning curve, but that's all I can really weigh in. Hey, give them a shot. They can only benefit you. There, I said something good about the summons. You happy? Oh, Okay, now we are going to discuss a new ability that is really controversial. The Disney-based attraction commands. Yeah, one of the biggest features for this game that a lot of us were looking forward to ended up becoming a point of contention. First, I'll explain how they work. Do you see those green looking cursors that appear over certain enemies? These will show up incredibly often, yet randomly on certain bad guys. By attacking that specific enemy just once, it will trigger one of the many Disney attraction commands to be put on your command list where your other abilities like form changes and super magic blasts will go. By using the left trigger, you can cycle through any of the commands and use whichever you want by following it up with the triangle button, or not use any of them at all if you want. Nothing is forcing you to. And they will go away on their own when the gauge runs out. Whenever you choose to activate one of them, an animation will play out, bringing forth the attraction. From there, you just mash away on whatever button prompts show up and just watch in awe as all of the enemies, including bosses, can be completely wrecked by these attacks. The common complaint is that these attractions show up way too often and are far too powerful. I cannot disagree. They are exactly that. However, despite this, I can't say I share the same amount of disdain for them as others because, again, there is nothing in place forcing you to use them. But I do understand why for some it can be frustrating. They are a little in your face, they are easy to accidentally trigger because triangle is the button to use to activate all those special moves, and it is easy to lose track of which subcommand your cursor may be currently on. You even have to use the triangle button to open treasure chests, so you can imagine how very simple it is to activate something even if you didn't want to. How to avoid Disney attractions, brought to you by the triangle button. The triangle button. Oh, I didn't mean to use that. Still, despite their obnoxious reoccurrence and absurd power, because I do know how to keep an eye on my command deck and use what I want, they still do not bother me as much as other people. I do kind of like them. They are flashy and very pretty, and you can turn off the animations for them in the menus if you want to shorten them up a tad. But yeah, I guess having Square tweak this feature wouldn't be so bad. The only reason I frankly don't like using them in my case is because for me, they just kind of break the flow of battle. Again, they look pretty, but I would just rather hit stuff myself with my giant key rather than play bumper cars with teacups. So yeah, if I were to give Square some ideas on how to resolve this issue, either have the ability to turn them off completely, or just have them show up a lot less frequently. Really, I think this is a problem that can be solved with relative ease, and maybe with a couple of menu selections. Lastly, when it comes to Sora's direct abilities, he also has the Shotlock ability lifted straight from Birth by Sleep. By holding down R1, you will enter the Shotlock mode where, depending on what Keyblade you have equipped and for how long you can keep up targeting enemies, Sora can unleash a pretty strong attack that fires off beams of light. Unlike other magic powers which drain the MP meter, this one is dedicated on the focus gauge, which will deplete as usual when you use the ability. I found that I don't really use this ability as much as I should, but I do bust it out every now and then if there are enemies in the distance. The Shotlock this time around also has a second feature. By holding down R1, like before, and scanning the environment, Sora can dash incredibly fast to far-off objects in the distance, and use this to reach some serious height. I think it's a little tricky to use properly sometimes, and I myself don't use it too much, as I think others do who have been lucky enough to figure out how to make it look so seamless. But, hey, look, it's just another option on the table. You don't have to use it, but if you can figure out how to do it and use it well, then all the better for you. Well, alright guys, that pretty much covers the combat on what Sora can do. But now what I'm going to talk about here is yet another subject that is quite debatable, and really something I think just depends on what kind of player you are, and what you find enjoyable in a video game. So try not to take this next section too seriously, and I know some people get radically offensive if you try to disagree with them on things like this, but just hear me out. I know some gameplay mechanic experts have been able to break this game's combat down and explain how it works and never fail to compare it to Tokyo Team Works. You know, despite this being a completely different engine made by completely different people with completely different ideas. As of now, since Square Enix has released its first major update for Kingdom Hearts 3, Critical Mode is now a playable option by popular demand, along with Beginner, Normal, and Proud. One of the biggest complaints early on was that before Critical Mode came along, the game felt far too easy, regardless of what difficulty you chose. I was definitely among those players, since I chose Proud Mode as my first option, and found that I had little to no trouble not feeling any real challenge. I mean, that's not to say the experience isn't by all means still fun. I mean, it certainly was. But for those wanting to at least feel like they have to really earn some sort of victory, the game for a time left a lot to be desired in that respect. Even the one post-game secret boss.
you know, those bosses that are supposed to make you really work for it, was little more than a pushover compared to previous games. When I fought this extra boss, I would hit him, he would hit me, and then my response would be just hit him back that much harder until eventually one of us went down, and it was usually always him. You could not do this with any of the extra bosses from previous Kingdom Hearts games, especially Kingdom Hearts 2. Sephiroth, being the prime example, was a complete punisher. Bosses like him meant taking your time, analyzing their attacks, learning from them, and timing and blocking accordingly, waiting for an opening to return fire on them and quickly get out of dodge when they retaliated. Even on the easiest setting, these super bosses weren't gonna just roll over for you. You still had to learn how they fight and earn it by thinking strategic. Not always easy to do, but it could be done. Now, just because Kingdom Hearts 3 doesn't have that kind of implemented system doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different. And it appears that Square has taken this into consideration, and looks like they might be going out of their way to fix it with updates in the future, with more extra bosses to come. That being said, the new critical mode feature has indeed also added a superb challenge to the game, forcing players to play very cautiously. I don't think critical mode is going to change the gameplay mechanic on how bosses fight, but what it does is make most of the enemy's attacks and powers devastating, if not outright fatal, which means you have little room for error. With critical mode, Kingdom Hearts 3, like the critical modes before it, turned this game into trial and error the game, the test of patience. I remember how much hell I put myself through a decade ago when I felt like I had something to prove and played Kingdom Hearts 2 on critical mode level 1 only, and somehow managed to 100% everything. The mushrooms, the Cabinet of Remembrance, the Chamber of Fuck, this asshat. This memory card here still contains this data, and I hold it as my trophy for obsession and persistence. There is something to be said for that kind of rewarding experience you feel when you conquer a challenge that by design is meant to be unfair. But still, that being said, critical modes and the people who support them. You know, there's also something to be said for hours of your life you're never gonna get back. The amount of frustration and years I have probably shaved off my life due to how angry that I got at how cheap and evil these modes are. This is how controllers get broken. This is how TVs get destroyed. Look, guys, not every game, not every obstacle needs to be a grind or the equivalent of a Dark Souls game. Look, I do agree that if you suck, you should lose, and if you lose, you do need to try harder. I really do understand that challenge is a good thing, as it allows the players to improve and hone their skills. But if your idea of fun and a proper challenge is dying over and over and over and over and over and over again until you can find that one strategy to get past a group of enemies, or perfectly be able to predict an enemy boss's moveset before they dish it out, or have to know the specific mathematical values of how much damage output a move deals, you know, the kind of gamer who can run up to 48 hours or more with no sleep, simmering in your ripe man juices, trying to perfect the strategy for whatever reason in your head says this is worth your time. Reality check, people.
This isn't my idea of fun.
At the end of the day, if that really is your thing, then look, far more power to you. But the larger majority would likely have it where challenge is given in increments as a game progresses. It should be the fair kind. I do love the idea of having super bosses that even further put your skills to the test, and the super bosses post-game, like in Kingdom Hearts 2, such as Sephiroth, or the organization data fights where you have to put more thought into your approach and combat style, is actually pretty good, and very rewarding when you do defeat them. And I think that's what we should be encouraging the programmers to do more of. These kind of fights that cater to the specific gamer that want that type of insane challenge, but otherwise isn't something you're forced to deal with. But the critical modes I do not feel are an ideal form of good challenge, as they feel like they are meant to just be unfair and hella unbalanced. Yes, Kingdom Hearts 3 was a little too easy all around, but I think just adding more super beefed up foes akin to this freak of nature, but even more well thought out, would have sufficed a lot more in the long run.
Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix Plus ended up with 15 super bosses. So even if you played on the easiest setting, these guys would still put you to the test and wouldn't just give you an easy win. Critical modes are a different breed. People kind of threw a bit of a fit when 2.8 showed how below the belt this kind of challenge was, and while it's just my opinion, it's one I'll stick by. Have super bosses that put your skills to the ultimate test, but don't do it by simply making a ridiculous mode where the player is limited with less than adequate statistics, making every encounter a near fatal one. I just don't think that's how a proper challenge should be. I don't know, maybe it's the old school gamer in me where games just had to progressively get harder and you as a gamer had to also equally get better and learn from your mistakes. But hey, what are you gonna do? I'll probably end up playing the new critical mode anyway because Lord knows I hate myself. Thanks, guys!
So now that we got the gameplay part out of the way, let me talk about the other neat things we'll deal with in this game. First of all, the worlds. They are huge. Like, you can fit several worlds from Kingdom Hearts 2 into one of these worlds huge. And while yes, I did mention Twilight Town being on the smaller side, the other worlds you will be visiting from Tangled, Frozen, Monsters Inc., Toy Story Big Hero 6, the Caribbean, Olympus. The world count may not be as big as we would like, but for what we got, the size and scale of these lands is enough to keep you busy for a while. There are plenty of things to fight, sights to see, lucky emblems to collect with your new fancy iPhone, you know, if you're into collectibles, and optional side questing things to take care of. For example, Twilight Town has a new bistro being ran by our dear little chef from Ratatouille. Haha, yeah, you thought I was gonna forget about him. Hell no, Little Chef is awesome and a lot of fun. Okay, so throughout all of the worlds, like you've probably heard by now, there is ingredients scattered far and wide. And by collecting numerous amounts of it and bringing it back to Little Chef, you can partake in a mini cooking game, where you can create some food porn, which you can then continue to create or buy afterwards. Whenever you do, you can compile all of this food into a 5-course meal, which can not only give you temporary status buffs, but extra perks, such as double experience for a certain time, and things of that nature. It's a really neat mechanic, and now that there is a critical mode, I can imagine this feature probably getting a lot more use than it did prior, since now you might actually need all the help you can get. So yeah, going back to the worlds, while you naturally will have Donald and Goofy with you the entire time, you will also be able to have up to 2 more party members tagging along. No more do you have to pick and choose. Now they will all help out in combat. Donald and Goofy are thankfully more useful than before, and now have their own team-based attacks that can randomly appear to even further give you an edge in battle. Some, once again, like to complain that because of how random it is, that it's poor design. Personally, for me, I disagree because, well, for one, I don't think you should ever be relying on an AI partner to give you an out. Stand on your own feet, you know? And secondly, I like that they are in charge of their own powers and doing their own thing. You can manipulate them to a degree in the menus, which is nice, but hey, even then you're not safe, so don't be over-reliant on partners. Let them do their thing and you do you. As for the worlds in which you're fighting in, I don't have a whole lot to say that I don't think hasn't already been said before. I love their design. I love that they are populated with actual life. If I had any complaints, they are likely the ones that you've already heard and are aware of. Arendelle has a whole lot of snow and not much else. Monsters Inc. is pretty linear. San Francisco doesn't have much to do there once the world is completed, but goddamn is it a spectacle that's fun to roam. The Caribbean, once again, proves to be a controversial world where most either completely love this world or absolutely hate it. I thought it was a fantastic world. The ship combat, for me, was very fun. I just kind of wish there was a little bit more of an incentive to do it. The islands, while great, I felt could have used a little bit more personality so that each one felt at least a little bit different. The underwater combat was a thing, but it's not something that lasts long enough to really complain about. But as far as mobility underwater, this is definitely the best we've gotten. So you know what? Kudos to the boys back at the development stage for finally making underwater exploration fun. All in all, not much to complain about there. But it's still going to be a very divided world. Oh man, I know this review has been going on way too long, so I'll just talk about one more notable enhancement that I think was finally done well. The Gummi ship. Yeah, we all remember how bad it was in the first game. Honestly, I think it was pretty good in the second one.
but this time they pretty much nailed it. With the exception of 2 space bosses, there is no mandatory mission to undertake with the Gummi ship anymore. If you really hated this thing, there is now nothing stopping you from driving this thing head on into the next Disney World so you can carry on your merry way. That being said, this time I found the Gummi ship exploration zones to actually be really enjoyable. Upgrading the ship is a ton easier now, and combat is very simple, as like before it's a bit of an on-rails shooter type. Enemies can be scouted from a distance and avoided entirely if you choose to do so. There's a whole bunch of minerals that can be farmed from meteors to upgrade your keyblades as well as other things. All in all, the Gummi ship this time was very non-intrusive and actually felt like a decent time killer. If I had some small complaints, I do think it takes a little too long to gain experience points to further enhance the ship, and I think farming for certain minerals could be less of a headache and they could spawn a little bit more often. But beyond that, the challenge is reasonable, the enhancement system is manageable this time, and combat is pretty fun because of it. So once again, a job well done. It took 3 outings to finally get it right, but hey, we finally got something here. Whew, alright, Kingdom Hearts 3. What more can I say? It's definitely something else. It's a game we've looked forward to for far too long, and even now I feel like we're still waiting, because now we gotta get that vanilla flavor out of here and work with Square to fine-tune this beast into the final mix version that everyone will smother and grow to love. And hey, if they don't, we'll deal with those people in time. That being said, I still think that the game is a lot of fun. It's not perfect by any means, but no game is. I mean, well, unless it's Tales of Eternia, but different story. Still, game was well worth the wait, because I know that down the line, oh man, it's gonna get even better. Square's already made vast improvements to the game with just 1 update, giving the sadists their hard difficulty they asked for, and even added a new game plus, which allows you to carry over all of your keyblades for a brand new playthrough, adding a ton of replay value and giving purpose to keyblades like the Ultima, which by the time you usually get it in games like these, the game is pretty much over. So shoot, way to go above and beyond. And we know more of this is coming soon. I cannot wait. It was an emotional trip. The game did have me crying at certain scenes, and if you've been a fan as long as I have, no doubt your eyes were creating rivers as well. No, not all of our questions got answered. We still desperately want to know what's in the box! Also, a lot of people were likely very disappointed with how Kairi in particular was handled in this game. And while I'm not losing any sleep over it because I primarily follow these games for Sora, I do understand that she was being built up for what seemed like a bigger purpose, and they really didn't do too much with it. Well, sort of. To be fair, she does end up being the one that does keep Sora alive during an event near the end of the game when all hell broke loose. So it's not like Kairi didn't have any cause to be involved. Hell, the game would be over if she wasn't there. But still, I guess people might have gotten their expectations a little too high for her importance. Keep in mind, she was, just not as big as initially expected. Kinda like Gohan from the Dragon Ball Z series, sadly. A lot of expectations, but ultimately didn't really go anywhere with it. Unfortunately, I think sadly this is just what kinda happens when you have too many characters to juggle in one outing and you refuse to let any of them stay dead. But who knows, given time, some, or all, or hell, none of these issues might be fixed with later enhancements. You never know. We just gotta wait and see. The game's only been out for a short time. Let Square know your feelings, give them the pros, give them the cons, and we will see what happens in the near future. One of the more eye-rolling complaints I've heard is how offended some people are about some of the in-game items, like the Koopa coin. First of all, this item almost went completely unnoticed by me, as once again, I don't think the game's overall challenge warranted its use. But what the Koopa coin does is, for only 400 in-game currency, man that's cheap, it acts as a second chance, immediately restoring your health in battle once it hits 0. You can only carry one at a time, but you do have to go out of your way to a Moogle shop and buy one again every time you lose it. Yeah, weirdly enough, there are some condescending gamers out there that find the sheer existence of this coin to be a blight on their gaming credentials and a slap in the face and proof of poor game design. Oh Jesus Christ. Look guys, if there's one point I'd really like to drive home, it's that choice is a great thing in these games, so that people can play in a way that matches their particular playstyle. Respect the fact that others may like the option. Don't take away from them when you can choose to pass it up, so there's not even an option to worry about it in combat. Oh, and it is by no means foolish or idiotic to suggest that if you don't like an item, to just not use it. This is not a flaw. It's there as an option for that very reason, the element of choice. The Disney attractions are the same thing, but like I said, I can understand them a little bit more because they are a bit more in your face about it. But this, you actually have to go out of your way for. It really is that simple. Don't like it, don't use it. If you continue to have a problem just because you don't like that the option even exists, this is really a you problem, and a problem with elitism in general. Something I cannot take seriously, nor should game designers. If we're going to continue to give game developers ideas and advice on what parts of their games need some fixing or tweaking to become a better product, that's fine. In fact, I highly encourage that, especially when the criticisms point out what actually can be considered problems in the game's mechanics, such as problems with the combat, glitches, or unbalanced problems and the like. But complaining about superfluous nonsense that doesn't help anyone, it's sending the wrong message and will just make finding the real problems more difficult. Thus, we end up later with something entirely different that nobody ends up liking as a result. That being said, I do think the Koopa coin definitely needs a price bump. A life-saving item like this would practically break the bank in any other game, and it does serve to make what I think is already a pretty easy game even easier. So if anything, I would suggest raising the price of the coin and also doubling the cost every time you choose to buy one. This, I believe, would give the player more pause so they have to consider if the price is worth the second chance. That to me would at least make it more balanced. Risk and reward, people. Kingdom Hearts soundtracks are usually always top tier stuff. For me, the game hasn't quite yet been out long enough for a ton of the tracks to be too impactful yet, but there still are some great remixes of well-known themes from the previous games, and some of the new stuff has already made my favorites. But there are still a ton of tracks to listen to, so it will take a while for me to get acquainted with all of it. You do not need me to tell you how absolutely beautiful Utada Hikaru's newest songs are, and how they reach right into your goddamn soul and yank out that sweet, tearful, emotional nectar. I don't know how this woman does it, but holy Christ, she does not fail to please. It is amazing how both her and the Kingdom Hearts series has done so much good for each other. She gave Kingdom Hearts that very special theme music that made it stand out well above the crowd, and I think it could be reasonably argued that in turn, Kingdom Hearts gave this woman a hell of a career. Hot damn, she has got the voice of an angel. Maybe it's because on the inside I'm a little punk, but I cannot listen to any of her themes without starting to get at least a little bit emotional. No, don't. Oh my god, there's the music. There it is. Oh, I can't. Please don't stop playing it. No, that voice. Oh, I need a minute. But here, while I'm taking care of this, listen to some of the other tracks that I found really good. Oh, hold on. Alright, I'm back. So, like many, I did think that Utada teaming up with Skrillex, of all people, was an odd choice, but I would be lying if I said the songs didn't grow on me. So, before I start tearing up again, let's move on.
Okay, so before we close shop, let me just say that above all else, I was satisfied with Kingdom Hearts 3. I do think that there were some missteps, and that there is some room for improvement. Such missteps like the Toy Story world, for example, not having the Emperor Zurg as a villain, and a few other missed opportunities. But hey, you know what? Until we can for certain say the game is complete and the last DLC patch comes out, who knows what is on the horizon. Maybe some of the questions in the story we want answered will show up. Maybe some of the perks or other things we desire may pop up. Who knows? But that's a tale for another time. That being said, I love the game, and I cannot wait to see more. Until then, my friends, you've been watching the Brotherhood of Gaming. I am William Morris, and I am signing off.
I don't wanna know, baby. I don't wanna know.
Hey there everyone, did you like this video? If you did, why not give us a thumbs up and maybe leave a comment and watch some more of our stuff? Also, if you really want to keep up with the Brotherhood of Gaming, such as myself, William Morris, or Eugene, you should really follow us on our Twitters, links provided below, so you can see what's coming up in the future. And since, we have to play these games sometimes and record them, why not join us on our Twitch page where you can hang out with all of us as we do so and chit-chat about the games that we love so much. Lastly, if you want to help keep our dreams alive, you can support us in any number of ways, either by continuing to view our videos, like them, share them with all your friends and family and your peeps and your girlfriends, or you can also join our small Patreon and throw all your spare cash away. We'll even give you a shout out. Once again, thank you all and have a wonderful day.